Good morning. Today we're going to build an amazing hanging gardens in the city of Thaldrim. Welcome back to MorningCraft. So in the last episode we built this foundation at the back of our mountain. And while it looks terrible now, I'm planning to turn this into an amazing hanging gardens by the end of the episode. So buckle up and get ready because we're going to be building something pretty awesome. The fortress the gardens will sit upon secures the entranceway into our city, and I built this nice river section with a little bit of a manicured garden outside. This was just to add a little bit of extra flavour to the build, but one of the things hanging gardens is going to need is a bunch of waterways, keeping all the plants nice and fed. You can see me here putting in some channels for the water to run down, and this runs down into the gate and feeds the lake which we built earlier. We've got some cool runoff pipes that go into this system, and we've got a few bridges to cross this water as it returns to the river. But with the outside finished, it's time to get back to the main build. I'm going to be starting with some giant walls and some tiered gardens inside along the waterways. I fill the waterways with running aqua and they look pretty good, but they're going to need some tiered gardens around them, otherwise they're just sort of weird pipes. And as I built up the gardens, I also built up the diorite walls of our hanging gardens. This is going to stretch all the way into the sky, but I'm going to try not to overshadow our cathedral. This did take quite a bit of material, but I think this is one of my favourite buildings in this city. I want to build a tiered structure to the gardens, leaving room for rows of trees on each level. And to demarcate the ending of each level, I'm going to be using oxidized copper. The oxidized copper and the diorite mixed together to give a really ancient look, like something that you'd see in sort of like ancient Byzantium. I think it's Byzantium? Byzantine, one of the words. Ancient, very old, looks good. That's the main point. Next, we're going to have to build a whole bunch of tiers for each of the levels of trees to sit upon. But before we can do that, let's go to a quick story segment.
Phantom, call every Viking tribe in the deep north. Request that they come to Thaldrim to negotiate. There is finally a city that has the interests of the Vikings at heart. It's time for all Vikings to be respected as a true power.
So we're back and it's time to build up the layered design of our hanging gardens. You can see I've put this first level of stone in here, but that's really more of a base for all the tiers to come. Tiers to come makes it sound like I'm going to be crying. Not quite, but it is beautiful. It's not teardrop inspiringly beautiful. I feel like that should be reserved for like birth of a child or something a bit more relevant to the real world. You can also see here that I've built an entranceway into our hanging gardens, and now it's time to build up the tiers. You can see I've added some pillars here atop of the smaller gardens inside the building. For each level, I'm going to have a bunch of pillars holding up the next. The levels and the pillars are going to get smaller and smaller as we go, and honestly by the end it looks a bit like a wedding cake. Although those are notably expensive, so I guess this is an expensive build. Kind of, but also not really. Lots of diorite, but no real world money. I guess I needed electricity to get it built. I guess it cost something. But here we have it, the flush entranceway, the waterways leading down, all the bridges over the small river that runs off from the hanging gardens, the fortress, the pillars, and our first few tiers. I think that looks pretty good. And we got a nice sandstone rim for the top level. The sandstone just adds that extra pop, as otherwise it would all be white and green. Especially when we get the trees in, lots of green to come. But with our overextended wedding cake in place, I was feeling pretty happy about this build. I did still need a few more pillars to hold up each of these levels, and of course we're going to need a ton of trees inside. I'm going to make sure that we have one of every single type of tree along the edges of each of these levels. And then we're going to polish these tiers off with a lovely dome. It's not going to be quite as good as our cathedral, you can see in the back there, but it's going to be pretty good. So what do you think? Look at those pillars, how they run all the way up the building. They start off really thick and get quite a bit thinner at the top. And then you can see our dome here made of andesite. And of course we have the fortress walls wrapping around the bottom, keeping it and the rest of the city safe. I think this is a pretty cool build, and I made sure to keep it nice and short so it barely peaks above the top of the mountain, because of course if it was too tall it would be in competition with our replica of St. Paul's Cathedral you can see there. It's a very bold build, but it's quite understated next to the cathedral. And as well, the natural look when we add in all the plants and trees really sort of blends it into the hill. So I'm really looking forward to showing you how this looks with a bunch of trees and plants. But first, we'll go to a quick story, and then you'll get to see it.
あなたは臆病者のように盾の後ろに隠れました。私はあなたが伯爵だと思っていましたか?
Is that Sakurajima?
桜島か? ここは風の島。桜島は反対側にある。ここは本州領土だ。彼らはほとんどの道を占領しており、やもなく営道を破壊するだろう。
Many historians consider the ascent of Jarl Armstrong and the gathering of the Viking tribes to be of great importance, but those events leave a shaky scrawl across the annals of history. Instead, the construction of the Hanging Gardens is a well-recorded moment, and to all who have researched the field is the best demarcation of the Thaldrim Golden Age. Jarl Armstrong's unification of the Viking tribes transformed Thaldrim and the world beyond. Once feared for their raids, the Vikings became a force of stability, forging an era of peace through strength. No longer did neighboring lands cower in fear. Instead, they prospered under the new order, as trade flourished and a cultural renaissance began. This shift left Mornington, once a regional power on the edge of the Dawn Protectorate, in decline. As Thaldrim rose, Mornington stagnated, its walls relics of a bygone struggle, its people unwilling to adapt. Vulnerable and fading, it stood in stark contrast to Thaldrim's golden ascent. The crowning achievement of this era was the Hanging Gardens, a marvel of engineering and ambition. It symbolized a civilization that had turned strength into prosperity, conquest into creation. To have lived in Thaldrim then was to witness the height of human achievement. No place was greater, no people more blessed than those who called Thaldrim home in its golden age.